Sammy. Okay, good morning everybody. Morning. Second to last meeting of the year. I guess there's quite a bit happening in these times. So welcome everybody, the staff and those online. This morning we've got James Thomas online, joining in the line. He's been a bit under the weather in Crook, so just staying away today just to safe.
His wordle abilities have really
helped. Right. So I think we're all present. There are no apologies. And is there any notification of urgent business? I think so. Declarations of interest. So we'll move on to the confirmation of our minutes for the 30th of October. I'd like to move the acceptance of these. Thank you, Caleb. Moved Caleb, seconded Councillor Dane. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We don't have a public forum this morning. So we will now move on to our decision making for the day. A bit going on and plenty to consider. So item 7.1 is our Waikato Waters Done Well Memorandum of Understanding. And obviously we've been reading about the opportunity to do things differently in the future. So when Manaia, you want to lead this?
Quite happy to lead off, Mayor Agent. Good morning, Mayor Agent and councillors. Happy to lead off on this item, but I acknowledge that the work that's been done on a collaborative basis is being led by our Chief Executive, and the report and information that was provided was from the project team, Vaughan Payne, Sinead Hart, etc., who were in the council boardroom last week. So I do not pretend at all to be fully informed on this issue, but I'm happy to lead off the initial discussion and talk about the focus of my report. I didn't try to repeat everything that was in that very comprehensive report from the project team. What I wanted to crystallise it down to is what this decision we're asking you to consider means in the context of our legal obligations. The report that was attached by the project team had a number of recommendations. I considered 3 of those recommendations to be the most important, so I'd just like to quickly address those. So importantly, you know that we, by law, have to go out next year to talk about and consult on, make decisions on how we strategically provide our water services going forward. And we're obliged to consult on at least 2 options. And it is our proposal that we only consult on 2 options because we don't have the capacity to consider more. One of those options will be what has been termed as an enhanced status quo. So what we do now designed to try and achieve the level of compliance that might be expected in the future. So let me call that enhanced status quo. And the other option is some form of aggregation. And as you know, our Chief Executive has been working with other councils. In fact, you endorsed that we work with other councils in the region to come up with an aggregated model for the Waikato. What this heads of agreement allows, if we sign it, is for us to progress through that option to gather more information that can feed into our consultative process. And if indeed a decision is made out of that consultation that a collaborative model is the selected, the selected option, all of this information builds towards that establishment of that kind of regional entity. At the same time, internally, our team, executive team, and Fiona's leading this, are also working on the enhanced status quo. So we've got 2 options. So this keeps us, if you like, in the group. And the Chief Executive will report on the status of that we know of various councils so far and what they've decided so far. It enables us to stay within that, enables us to leverage off the work that is already being done on a collaborative basis, which has been quite extensive. It does commit us, if we do go down this path, to a degree of cost, and Chief Executive and I were in a meeting this morning with other Chief Executives from the Waikato and other staff about how costs would be shared. It is our view that these costs at Matamata-Piako, our view here, that these are costs we would incur anyway, and getting to a process where we would consult. I'd point out they're not costs that we budgeted in our annual plan, but we're also talking about how we can manage those costs within our budget and how this might be part of the investment going forward if there is a regional collaboration model that does eventuate. So there are 5 recommendations in the report that was prepared by the project team. Number 1 was that the information received. Number 2, that the purpose of the heads of agreement is noted. That number 3, which is probably the most important one from our perspective, is that council agrees to present the regional service delivery option as outlined in the heads of agreement as one of the options that we consult on. And that for that to occur, that the Chief Executive be authorised to sign the heads of agreement. They also asked another option, a question, and that is, in principle, whether council would be prepared how far it is prepared to commit in terms of a regional model if that eventuates. And in the heads of agreement, there are 2 stages that have been identified. Stage 1, and they've been identified, the Chief Executive can explain more in depth than I, but my understanding of those 2 stages was to allow council, acknowledging that various councils in a regional model will have different pressures and different context, and that some of those councils may only want to go a certain phase before they commit any further, which is the stage 1, whereas others might be prepared to go all the way to stage 2. What are those 2 stages? Stage 1 is effectively a form of collaboration which allows for asset management planning and project delivery to be aggregated in the first stage. Stage 2 is all water delivery services for water and wastewater would go to the collaborative model. It is our view and our recommendation to you, I think I can speak on behalf of our Chief Executive, we wouldn't be going into stage 1 unless we were looking at this as a long-term delivery option. And so in signing the heads of agreement, we are saying that this is an option that we're prepared to consult on. However, if we go into a regional collaborative model, we would be looking at that as a model for all of our water delivery services, all of them, not just one. The practical issue from our perspective is how quickly that could happen if it were to happen. And so the only caveat I put on that is, and a way that I would put it, and I know the Chief Executive has talked about this, if there are 9 councils in the group that are all 8, all 7, that are all committed to a regional delivery model, and the goal is 1 July 2026, not a long way off. There's some practical issues about how quickly that could be done. And all I would say is I'd want us to reflect on what works best for our council in a practical way. So strategically, we would be signalling we'd go to stage 2. Can we get there by July 26th? I have my questions about that. I have questions about whether we as an organisation have the capacity to achieve that outcome. So that's the caveat I'd put on that. So just in refreshing, I've put it in the recommendation. I am recommending that the regional service delivery option is approved as one of the 2 options that we must consult on. That the Chief Executive is authorised to sign the heads of agreement. That Council confirmed that it would be its intent that if the regional delivery model comes to fruition and through the consultative process, that is a confirmed decision, that we would be signalling to that stage we are willing to go the whole way. It's just the timing of that whole way, if that is the option. The one nuance I would say that came out of the workshop last week from the back of the room when I was speaking to the presenters, in terms of this regional option, there are councils who are, and you will hear soon from the Chief Executive, there are councils who are already committed to the heads of agreement. There are other councils there are a couple of councils who still have issues that they are working through, and would be fair to say that they are not certain yet whether they will have this over the line. What our presenter said to me at the end of the meeting after they presented to you is there's a certain amount of authority or assurance in the decisions that you make now. And one of those might be whether you're prepared to signal in the region, in our consultative process, that the collaborative model is actually your preferred option. Okay? That of the two options, your collaborative option, the regional option is a preferred option. Now, you don't have all of the information, and all of that other information is still coming to you. What I can say with a degree of confidence is that in modelling a enhanced status quo, which is what we do now, but souped up, versus a regional model, and I've seen the regional financial model. I haven't seen all the outcomes of it, but I know the structure of it. It is highly unlikely that an enhanced status quo financially will be better than a regional model. And why? Why? What is the fundamental outcome of that? Well, reason for my thinking is that the regional model, financial model, is going to have some assumptions around efficiency from aggregation that we cannot build into our model. Because I'm not brave enough to say that an enhanced status quo will achieve that. So I hope, I just wanted to crystallise this down to, this is about staying in the collective and in the collaborative process to get to a point where we can consult in an informed way, and you still have a decision which option that you will take. That comes later. This keeps us in the process. I hope I haven't confused things, but I'm sure the Chief Executive can answer all questions.
That's a question, and then Don can answer, really. First of all, Don, we were just talking before about the skill level of the team that are putting this together, and credible understanding of the issues and how well they put it across was my thing. Number 4, because when I read it, I thought, why aren't we going to stage 2? And then I realised we don't need to go to stage 2. We just need to sign off on stage 1. But reading number 4, it's kind of in the wording, isn't it, really? But do we need to confirm that we would have an intention to go to stage 2? Is that important at this stage? Because it's all about the consultation, really, isn't it? So that was all. It's kind of it's a double-edged sword, that statement. So I just wondered why it's there.
Well, I think something in there. Yeah, there's 2 aspects to that. One is the difference between committing in principle to stage 1 at regional level, which is the management model that Manaia referred to. We will continue to own our assets and manage them, but they will provide the asset management and project management function for us. So that was put there as Manaia suggested, for councillors who perhaps are grappling with a number of different issues and feel more comfortable only going to that stage at this point with an intention at a later stage maybe join up. Or whether in principle, putting all the other issues aside, you're happy to signal that, hey, look, we are interested in this aggregate, it is a valid option for us to consult on. But we feel that we should support, it would be our intention to go to the full Monty rather than park ourselves in the neutral phase. So that's one aspect. And in terms of absolute commitment, you've still got an off ramp at the end of public consultation.
Can I just ask you say this option here that we're discussing and that it has, I guess, logistically some savings to be made. Am I so right in thinking that the government is kind of backing councils to go into this type of CCO agreement with people around them and potentially offering them like cheaper interest rates and things like that, which would also be a financial saving over just logistically?
They're saying, well, the minister is very clear in his intention to support regions that go into an aggregated model. They are not signaling any funding for that, but I don't think I'm putting anything on the table that would surprise anyone. I think they would be delighted to offer help, intellectual help, liaison help, coordination help, all that sort of stuff, in order to make it happen if there were strong signals that it was happening.
He's noting the fact that the Waikato region is the most advanced in this space at this point in time.
Correct.
And I think from a mayoral perspective, the willingness, the coalition of the willing to try and find a way to work together constructively as a region is being positively looked upon. Peter.
Yeah, Manaia, a question for you. So stage one will deliver to council all the facts and figures of the collaborative agreement, and council will produce all the facts and figures of the extended status quo proposal. And assuming that consultation, the public will compare all of that and all the other reasons for going down the collaborative path. What's the time frame for that to happen? Consultation.
So it's March, April, I think, for consultation from off the top of my head. So there's quite a bit of work to be done between now and then. The intention is that at the end of that consultative period, councils will make a decision on whether they are confirming which option they're then going to proceed with. And presumably, if it's the aggregated model, the next phase is starting to prepare for that process.
And related to all of that, I mean, what's the magical number of councils that have to opt in for this to proceed? I mean,
well, the magical number would be 9, but we know we're probably not going to get that. I mean, at the moment, Waipara have indicated that they've formally resolved to proceed with this exercise. Waitomo have done so. We understand that confidence that Hauraki, Otorohanga and South Waikato will also participate. The unknown is Waikato, and the known is Hamilton City doing it.
Well, I think Councillor Jack was reading my notes, which doesn't help me. I guess reading everything that's being put forward to us, and I'm quite reassured with the knowledge that there is a significant number of our sister councils, brother councils, want thanks, Peter, you read from me. Manaia, what do you, if you give me a ballpark, what the long-term savings might be to the collaborative compared with the enhanced solar method? Because I know that there's these initial outlay costs and other things that we're going to accrue along the way. But if there are savings to be had, what are they?
there's two metrics I'd refer to. One is based on actual experience that was shared with the chief executives that I happened to be listening to in a meeting of council that combined their water services with another extremely large water service delivery provider. And it cost them, from memory, $4 million, I think it was, to establish delivery services from that provider in their local area. They recovered that in 2 years from efficiencies from projects. Now that's a real example, which we actually haven't, or the original model hasn't gone to that extent, but that's a real experience that was shared with us. The model builds in a factor of what they call an efficiency gains factor, and they also have a component which is invest to save. So have a component of capital investment to save. So the efficiency factor that they've built in for each year, which they believe is conservative, so this is across the operating cost, etc., is 5%. So, as I said before, I know our financials, I know our long-term plan. I wouldn't be building in anything like that as an efficiency gain from an enhanced model. There might well be, but I think our focus now in the water service delivery, we're doing the best we can to achieve compliance. We know the bar is changing. We know the bar is going up, and we're going to try and see how close to that bar we can get. But I think most of our focus in the early years is not on efficiency gains. If we were to stay alone, it's how do we get to that bar.
Thank you, Noah. I've been nothing but impressed with how this whole thing's been put together. And that's where Sue and I were discussing. This is would have got over that line when we were discussing Three Waters, because it's taken away that where there were some real issues, right, and it's put it firmly in place that we would get much more efficiency, much more reliability, safeguards. Don, do you mind if I just...
No.
Right. I asked Don a question, because one of the things that came into here that I wanted an explanation was paragraph 3.7 talks about economic regulation will shift the focus from delivery against budget to outcomes, quality service, and customer benefits. And I wanted to understand what that meant. And Don's reply for he's quite heavy. The economic regulatory responsibility will shift to the Commerce Commission. Their role will be to assess whether the investment and operating resource and systems put in place by a water supply entity are adequate to achieve an appropriate level of service and reliability for the consumer. The most obvious example of where an economic regulator would have interceded many years ago is Wellington Water. In that case, the constituent councils did not provide the CCO with adequate funding, so rates didn't go up, and the level of investment did not ensure an adequate level of service. So I think we've got to understand that the government are come in and say, you're not doing things right, all right? So to me, this model and what have you is what we absolutely need.
I'll just make the point, sorry, Carlo, if you don't mind, you just triggered something that's in the report, but I think it's quite an important one. It's an important one we've talked to with our staff, that the scenario we face now, we actually have more control and influence over. We have control and influence over. If we do go down an aggregated model, because of the agreement and the structures they've put in place, you have the opportunity to have more shape that more than it being dictated to you. So that's an important but subtle difference, I think, between where we are now and where we were a little while ago.
Gary.
Ia ke, pai timu tai pari ki te mā koe rangatira pai ki tēnei tēnei te pākōrero. Just a couple of points for me, fellow councillors. I questioned last week about, I guess, the role of mana whenua and tangata whenua within this process, and I was comfortably assured that Māori aspirations had the opportunity to participate in the Māori bill as presented last week. I also made note of the vision statement, which is Te Mana o Te Wai, which has in itself, in a package of words, has huge responsibility on this organisation to deliver to that vision. So that's a strength from my perspective. But also just backing up on Bruce's words and the national scale and collaboration, I think are absolute positive aspects. Our small council is a huge government. That is why it is good. I support all the recommendations.
Gary. So we've got no more lights on. I think that. Oh, sorry, Dave.
That's right. I was just going to say that from the meeting we had last week, I really liked that they had, the council was from Hakura that was involved, who had been involved in water care was done. So I feel like we're kind of like not, we're not the first head through the brick wall on this. They're taking some learnings from that was done in the past with that. Which I think was really kind of reassuring to have, people with some actual real world experience trying to, up the top heading this up. So, I was going to say there was no lights on when I was doing that. And I was going to say I'm happy to move the recommendation as this, but there's a few more lights now. So.
Okay.
Well, Councillor Horn is happy to move it. I'm happy to do it.
I've got another light on. Okay, Peter.
It's another question. I don't know if anybody can answer this, but Hamilton City Council, their business is not our business. But why do they not see any benefits in heading down this path?
But they do. They genuinely do see a future where perhaps there'll be one across the Waikato. I think they've just got so many challenges that are unique to them, their growth and the way they have historically funded this activity. And being able to deal with all of that has just meant that they didn't want the burden or the complication of trying to participate in something that involved others.
Do they have to consult with their rate?
Yes.
So what models are they going to use?
Their own CCO.
Yeah,
their own CCO.
Current status quo.
Yeah. But the conversations are looking that eventually there would be a Waikato, the intention. The Lego blocks will be the same, so they do come together. That's the terminology. Right, so do we want to signal a preferred option? Again, as we keep an open mind, this is a decision that has to be made. So
Dane's suggesting the recommendation in entirety.
Yep. And so moved Dane, seconded Caleb. With that, no more discussion. Put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you, team. This has been a big piece of work, and I think it's showing courage from our council and other councils in the region to find a way forward. It's been signalled for a long time, and massive piece of work. So thanks to Don, especially as our LCE, that's put a lot of effort in this on behalf of the region. And we will see what happens in the coming weeks. Thank you. Okay, item 7.2 is the Risk and Assurance Committee. We have the committee report. Now, I'll take that as read. Jaylene is not joining us this morning. Is there any questions or discussion from the Risk and Assurance report? We had I think just as the Risk and Assurance Committee now, I think, is really taking that step forward. Council with its whole risk profile, it's really is aligning really well, so we understand the complexities more. And I think there's a few more checks and balances that we as a committee have put in place as well under the leadership of JD.
New dimension.
And yeah, we have taken it to a new dimension and really the real belt and braces approach that Susan Dryden String used to talk about when I was a new councillor a wee while back. So if there's no questions or discussion, could I please have a mover and a seconder that the report be received? Should be received. Thank you, Gary. Moved Gary, seconded Bruce. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, item 7.3, the adoption of the annual report and summary for 2023 and 2024, and a race to get it through. But nice to have it done so you can clear your brain for the next things going forward.
Really well into the next thing.
Yeah, thanks, Nadia and Olivia. Oh, good morning, Renee. Sorry, yes, and Claudia. Yes, good morning.
We are very pleased to present the annual report for 2023-2024. A big thank you to the auditors that have been working alongside us to get it to this point, which is a lot of work behind the scenes, which is really close to this stage. I will just briefly speak to the service performance measure side. Then I'll pass over to Lania. So we had 65 measures this year. We achieved 38 of those, which is a score of about 58% in terms of achievement, which is the same score as we got last year. So we had improved. So that and so we reported against the same standards as we did last year. So we just made sure to include those extra disclosures and judgments in our reporting to make sure that the community understand how we got some of those results that are what's reported. But yeah, so yeah, it's to be.
Morning, everyone. So our audit started in early September and it was going really smoothly initially, and then unfortunately outside of the auditor's control, the team got moved on to some other jobs. So we sort of lost a bit of time in the middle of it there, but it was a bit protracted, but we've got here. And yeah, acknowledge the audit team because they've put in a huge effort to make sure we could get here today, including nights and weekends. So our teams as well. So from the version that you were given in your pack, we have had a few tweaks over the last week, dotting all the I's and crossing the T's. So just some of the bigger changes were in the cash flow statement, we've reclassified a gain on sale property from operating to a finance activity. So that then flows through to our financial prudence graphs and other things. We made an adjustment in the PPE note to address some concerns we had around how reflected the work in progress that we kept on the books last year.
Just to clarify PPE, I think we all remember that, yeah.
Property, plant and equipment, live and breathe this stuff. So yeah, so we've changed some things there so that it as well flows through to funding impact statements and financial prudence graphs. And then just a change we've just talked through with the auditors this morning is in the summary document, there's a graph on our capital expenditure. So that will also be changing in the final adoption. So we'll ask for some, that we can reflect some minor amendments in our recommendation today. Financial prudence graphs, the risk and assurance meeting last week, we talked about the balanced budget benchmark. So after reflecting on that, just made some discussion in there about how council had adopted the unbalanced budget, and that was largely due to not having depreciation. So I've made some comments on there to reflect that better. And then in the non-financial performance measures, there was also some additional disclosure made around the roads business. Otherwise, pretty much what you've got there is what we're going to do things today.
To Renee, I guess. Morning, Renee. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, good morning, everybody. We're pleased to report that the audit has been completed. Before you have a clean or unmodified audit report, it means that the financial statements and the performance information are, in our view, presented fairly in all respects. So as Lania just mentioned, as you would recall, we opted to use the additional time available in terms of the statutory deadline this year, and we are signing a little bit later today than what our initial planning was earlier this year. And then just a thank you to council and management for the assistance and the support. It's been a bit of a relentless year with the LTP and going into the audit just following that. So we still have the report to council that we need to finalise after today, and we'll present that to you soon. And then there'll be a small pause before we start up again with planning and interim work for the 2025 audit. I think that's everything from me. If anybody has got a question, happy to have a look at that.
Thanks, Renee. Yeah, it's certainly a long bit of work, and you repeat this over and over throughout councils across the country. Any questions for the team? I think the key point here is that what's being picked up isn't significant. It's all in relatively clean code and a tidy up in a few places. So don't think there's any lights on. I think we're ready to move on. I think that's probably the thing, isn't it? We live this. You guys live it every day, and we have to follow through. And so with that, what are the recommendations have you changed from our agenda pack?
It was we had scratched out.
I'll pop the light on.
Sorry, I scratched out I believe around the summary of issues noted that was captured in the letter of representation this year, rather than a misstatement schedule as has been done previously. And then the other thing that we wanted to amend the recommendation is around that the report summary are adopted, subject to any minor amendments today to make those smaller changes that we mentioned earlier today.
So I've had Tamara pop it up on the screen. So that is the new recommendation. So give me time to introduce Jay. It's just, as Olivia said, just those amendments. So it's
Just number 3 really, isn't it?
Yeah, and then and just the more fitness.
D, 1D.
And then just I need to look for the word of fitness section 13. So we have put in dashes where we would expect there to be ticks from members. So just want to make sure that everyone's fine with that as well.
I'll move.
Yep. Okay. No, Bruce said so. I'll just say that our 58%, we described it at fraud risk insurance as a solid C. It's a pass with exams, but it's something that we always want to improve. So yeah, I'll put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Claudia, too, for the work you've done. John?
Yeah, and as this is my last audit,
Yes.
Renee and Claudia, thanks very much for all the positive attitude you brought to the table. I know that the year you started, Renee, having come out from South Africa, was pretty rough.
COVID, yeah.
And maybe we might have been a little bit curt at times with you as you moved the ropes. We met at night really helpfully. But in the 20 odd years that I've been chief executive, I've always found audit NZ staff are very willing to find a solution and a way around things. And you must always understand that in a non-competitive taxation authority such as us, it's very important for confidence in our system to have trust and confidence in the institutions which are part of that democracy. So thanks, guys, and all the best. And I'm sure the next chief executive will be nice to you as well. So I'm very confident of that. And all the best in your endeavours.
Thank you very much.
I probably should add, sadly, the Office of the Auditor General, Mark Maloney, passed away last week. We had him in the office actually here at the start of our triennium, and he passed away suddenly. So quite a change at the office in Wellington too. So a gentleman that had been quite involved with the office for a long time. And I guess you would have had quite a bit to do with him, wouldn't you, Renee? Yeah. Yeah, no, very sad. Right. Well, thank you, team. And yeah, just reiterate Don's word today, Claudia, and it's nice to have it signed off today. Thank you.
Thank you
And
very
Merry
much.
Christmas. See
Thank
you
you.
in the new
Thank
year.
you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, now item 7.4 is the Regulation 19 Port Alcohol Fee Setting Bylaw.
So I'd just like to advise you guys that the Wicker Street Rooster is been captured.
Well done. I'm sure the neighbourhood will be very happy about that.
It's been like 5 months. So. Just lost thing. So yeah, we're just seeking that receive the Regulation 19 report and mandate us to explore a fee setting bylaw for alcohol fees.
Yeah. Go from there. Sandra, you got anything to add?
I mean, I realise council, we've discussed this in an open public workshop, but basically the legislation for this says that you can either use those regulated fees, which were set back in 2012. There has been discussion of updating these by central government, but yet to see any sign of that. So they're now, 12 years old with no increase, no inflationary increase or anything like that. There are quite a number of other councils that have put in a bylaw to increase these fees to assist with recovery of costs. So like Ryan said, we're at the stage where we'd like to start some early engagement with some stakeholders if council would like to go along that lines and bring you back a draft if that's the way you wish to proceed early in the new year.
I'll move that, Adrian.
Yeah.
I think it's time.
Yeah. So moved, Sue, seconded Dane. Yeah, I'll just add that the key point here is it's 12 years since those numbers and the value of our dollar has changed so much, the costs have increased so much. So with that, I'll put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Was.
I was supposed to have an update from there, but we can move on from that if you like. Okay. No, there was a general thing. And we're done.
Oh yeah, the regulation.
Yeah.
19.
I think that was probably from last year. I'm quite happy to.
No, we probably should defer back to that just to let you have, as the district licensing chair, you've got some points.
Well, it was really just a general, and I just thought it was reasonably timely. So that's a good idea. Just to reiterate again, the alcohol industry is not your normal retail industry. It's heavily regulated, and we as a council are the ones that monitor that. Huge fines for breaches, sale of underage alcohol, etc., etc. And there are consequences, and they're costly for both the individual and the business. And just recently, I attended a hearing to observe a hearing in Hamilton for a breach of the rules. And yes, it is an expensive process for. And I've also recently completed a couple of webinars with Lorena, who's not here. Our hearings have been quite formal in the past, and they are very stressful for those people that have chosen to ask for a hearing, and they are now going to a more relaxed environment so that we can sit around and chat. People are comfortable because this is their career, this is their future, and we need to make the best decision we can.
It's actually more formal than a hearing for the resource consent.
Yeah, and for people that have never been through that before, it is incredibly stressful, and both times we've needed a box of tissues, and it's quite tough. So it's tough on them. So these regulations, the team do an amazing job. I am at the end of the process. It is quite a long, laborious process with Ministry of Health and the police and through our processes, and then it comes down to me. So really, I am the last one on the list, which I thought was really an ideal time to thank them for the work that they do, because you have no idea what goes into these applications from people looking for their manager's licenses or special licenses and so on. So Lorena, who's not here, she takes the heavy lifting and does the applications, and Ken Ranger, we try and be as easy as we possibly can. If somebody's made a mistake, particularly not putting in their applications on time, he will call me and say, what do you think about it? We try to be as easy as we possibly can, because I know the stress people go through when they've forgotten to put in a application. And of course, Ellie's in there and Ryan's in there as well. So Ryan was at the hearing last week. So yeah, just really an official thanks to the team for what they do. It's hard work. Sometimes we do question probably whether we need it or not. Somebody made that comment last week, but that is what we do. That is what we do.
And I think also just to acknowledge the customer services team, because they're the front line that receive the applications too. So there's a step process of how this all comes to being that it reaches to for her approval as the chair of the licensing committee. With that, thanks, Sue. My apologies for not putting that before the recommendation.
A nice time to
It was, absolutely. So thank you to the team for their work. Great. Thanks, Ryan. Right, we will now move on to item 7.5, which is the land transport funding for 2024-25. Morning, Sue.
Good morning, Mayor and councillors. I've put the details in the report as a summary. I think we've really tried to anticipate for our long-term plan where the government's priorities would lie with regards to co-funding our program. We got it reasonably right, but there were a couple of changes when we did receive the final co-funding from New Zealand Transport Agency, and we're just asking council to consider whether they wanted to still invest. One of the big, I suppose, losses or where there was no investment was in that low cost, low risk, which captures our speed management and any other safety work. So, and the paper in front of you just asks council to consider whether it still wishes to invest some only local share to achieve some of those outcomes, whether it wants to do a reduced program that we could kind of fit into our budgets and have minimal impact, or whether we don't complete any work in that space for the next year.
Thanks, Sue. I guess with nobody having their lights on, we've budgeted this money in our rates, haven't we? This year, although we haven't got funding from the government for the 51% or whatever the far rate is, we have budgeted this amount in our budget anyway. So I guess the option is, okay, we can only do half as much because we haven't got funding, but it's a case of can we do a little bit to keep moving forward? And because we've sort of started that momentum, my question would be is that so long as there's comfort that we're not going to overblow that budget, that we just keep within the parameters. There's the risk of cost blowing, but they seem to be relatively low risk things that you want to step through. We've got the capacity to do it because we planned to do it initially. There's the timing of the national policy statement, the GPS government policy statement coming out, and the timing of our LTP. This is where we've got this disconnect. So yeah, Caleb.
I'm usually averse to spending money. However, I think, especially with minors, a lot of what I read in the report, there's a fair bit of safety work around schools and high-risk intersections. I do think we should probably go, in my estimation, with option 3 and improve those high-risk areas. I think that would be a better outcome for us and for our ratepayers, some of whom who have complained to me and other councillors, I'm sure, of the condition of our roads and wanting to improve them. So I think the long-term benefit of investing the 849,000 in improving the safety of our roads is actually worth the money. So that's where I would go.
I think the catch. Yeah, I suppose I have. That's a catch. That's funding the government ourselves. We haven't budgeted for that.
I understand that. Yeah, I do understand that.
Yeah, and sorry, and I think in the report it does go through. At the moment, we don't have that funding. Part of that, not getting the subsidy also means that our income's reduced, so that's on our books as well. But yeah, you can fund the 849, which is what was fully in the long-term plan. It's just, how do we, council would need to probably reduce or find some money somewhere else. And I don't know where else there is funding, and we'll cut the maintenance budgets.
Yeah, it's not straightforward. Is the point we need to make here.
I suppose 400,000 would have to be a reduction in that maintenance budget if you wanted to stay within the total overall budget of roading and care.
There's implications.
Yeah.
Bruce.
Well, no, I was just going to comment. I gave Sue a very clear objective. We have to stay within our budget. So I think we would love to do more. But the reality is the rules have changed. So It's your call what you end up doing, but that was the
That's the
intent of the
risk.
report.
We're adding like 849, we're looking 291, that's over 1% over everybody. Yeah, Bruce.
Well, really, we agreed on doing the work, right? Subject to getting the subsidisation.
Yeah.
Right? So we could agree to doing the work up to what we budgeted from our own funds. That's what you're saying, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
And I have no objection.
Yeah. So I guess Caleb's posed the other option of the option 3, and the recommendation is with option 2. So with no more lights on, has anybody going to with recommendation?
I would move the states.
Option 2. So moved Jane. Seconded Sarah Jane. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Yeah, the challenge is the extra cost, Caleb. You know, that's adding, yeah, you don't get as much bang for your buck.
I appreciate that. I carefully considered that one.
I had got NZTA to fix their roads.
Righty ho. Well, with that, we will break for morning tea. Right. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We're just running a little bit ahead of our run sheet schedule, but that's all good. We have our officers and staff in the room for the next agenda item, which is item 7.8, retaining wall at the RSA in Southern Street, Lawrenceville. Good morning, Roger and Williams.
Good morning.
Whichever way you want to.
Good morning, Mayor and councillors.
The light. Can you see pop the microphone over just for please and turn it on? Thank you.
Good morning to everybody. I'd like to take this paper as read, but there are a number of things that have happened since the item went onto the agenda, so I can give an update. Also, in the last 10 minutes, I've had a draft legal opinion about whether a consent is needed or not and what we can do that. I'm not allowed to distribute it, but I can speak to it if that's people are happy with that.
Yeah.
So, can I take questions or I do?
Taking the report as read. And you've got a legal opinion that you can share with us verbally. So might as well do that.
I'll give the legal opinion first. So, just as a background, why we went for this legal opinion is that in order to rebuild a retaining wall, it requires a building consent. The retaining wall in question spans 2 titles. And under sections 75, 76 of Building Act, I think that's correct, you can get a consent across 2 properties, but it has to be signed off. But there's only if the same owner owns both sections. In this case, we don't. So though we've got a dangerous structure building notice on it, we cannot get a building consent to replace that dangerous structure. So it's a bit of a loophole.
So therefore 2 consents are needed?
No, because there's a paper wall effectively between the 2 consents, and engineering it has to join together to get a sign off. So legally it cannot be done if you go down that line, unless we did a boundary adjustment or we sold our property to the adjoining owner, then it can be amalgamated. So that's why the costs were quite high, with that potential of doing those changes. What we've now got a legal opinion is that under Schedule 1 of the Building Act, we can apply for an exemption of not requiring a building consent. And it's, broadly speaking, it's on the basis that it's impractical, but the condition is, I'm reading this as I go through here, so I can. So the Building Act enables territorial authorities like the council to use its discretion to exempt proposed building work if it complies with the building code and is unlikely to endanger people or buildings. While exemptions are often granted for more simple building work than at present, MB, Ministry of Building, Innovation and Employment, has been clear that discretionary exemptions can be granted for complex engineered projects where the constructive work will be designed and supervised by chartered professional engineers. Examples of such work include single-span bridges on public land, complex temporary stage and lighting towers, or major infrastructure projects such as motorway tunnels, electrical substations, rail networks, or substantial wall repairs. Given that the new wall will be designed by a suitably qualified engineer, which I confirm it is being, and that the works will be similarly undertaken by a suitably qualified contractor, it is our view that this will be an appropriate circumstance in which the council, in its capacity as building consenting authority, might grant a discretionary exemption.
Right.
So that's their legal opinion.
That's some clarification. So
I can provide those words to the tomorrow if required.
So is this a case of that we have received the report and we leave it at that, because there's obviously a lot more work to go under the bridge, so to speak?
Any other direction, Bruce?
Yeah, look, I've looked at this quite deep. We can receive the report, right? I think we need to give staff the ability to continue the thing, and I think that means to pursue it, you've got to go ahead with getting, you know, a full design and costings, right? So how we want to look at that, but we need to know the full details. So you've got to go a little bit further. It's good to get that.
So I guess is it council's cost to proceed with getting the design done, given that the RSA is probably as well.
So from my point of view, we're talking a cost sharing of some sort, all right? And the structural design and what have you is only part of the overall cost of the project. It's one component of it.
Yeah.
And so when you get your full costing, that's when, or costing estimate, including the construction cost, then you can enter a negotiation with a much clearer idea of where it stands and see where you get a cost sharing from. I know that's how I see it.
You got any comment to that, Tom?
No, Councillor Hughes, right, we need to know the facts, and the only way we get the facts is by doing the detailed design and getting the estimates properly done. Instead of young guys saying, right, well, how do we share these costs?
And that means at this stage we're going to have to bear that cost, and it'll be a cost recovery as part of the cost sharing.
Yep, the understanding. Thank you. Peter.
Yeah, I've got concerns regarding the cost or the unknown cost. When I read this, I mean, they talk about, you know, a cost of 280 to 300,000, but who knows what it will be. That's why I have trouble with recommendation 3, which may follow from what Bruce was talking about, where, you know, the allocation, approve the allocation of a budget. I mean, I'd like to know what the cost is going to be before I'm part of an approving system. I mean, it's $1 million, who knows?
Yes, and I understand, but the wall does need to be fixed.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, fixed versus replaced. I mean, the engineers say it has to be replaced, yeah?
Yep.
They're going to take the whole thing down and build a whole new wall, yeah?
No, I think there was some talk about doing some options or some consideration perhaps of only taking the wall up part height and then rebating it back. But until, and you'll need the RSA's cooperation in order to do that. But to get to that point, you know, unfortunately, we've got to break eggs.
I'll go to James online. Good morning, James.
Morning, troops. Morning, me, Adrian. Yeah, no, just I guess along what Bruce is saying, and you know, we need to have all the facts first. I am a little concerned that, I mean, I understand why RSA have put a line in the sand, as it were, with 100K, but if we're looking at an indicative price of 300,000, that pushes it a bit. I just wondered too, is that price, I just want some clarification, is that like for like, or is that just a different retaining wall? I suppose we need probably some other options as well. Is that in that price?
The price, I'd just like to address the breakdown that I've got here. This is just an office estimate. It's not like for like, but it is a Bowers interlocking concrete wall that is relatively low cost in relation to the total that's in the document. What I would like to point out is that the design costs, which I have been given authority to engage the engineer to do the full design, that is just under $16,000 plus $2,500 for some additional boring to take soil samples. All we're really committing to do at this stage. Once we've got that information, we can then work out the cost of actually building the wall. I've also put provisional amounts in for boundary adjustment, legal survey, building consents, which looks like we now won't need to follow that process. Well, that on my estimate was $27,000. So we can already take that off of that 280 to 300,000. So we can. I agree with what we're saying, that the cost looks horrendous, but it was a worst case scenario with the information we had at the time. But as we refine things and get more details, we can actually get a more accurate cost. The reason we're asking for funding so far to date, the work that we've done does not have a budget. And even this engineering that we've now been given the go ahead to do by management does not have an allocated budget.
Thank you. Are we, just some clarification around the building consent, given that legal advice, is it safe to assume? Because that's a bit of an assumption, really.
That is not my, sorry,
No,
I
it's not
interrupted.
your space, so thanks,
So
Elliot.
maybe I can add some points then. So there will need to be a process where council and the RSA apply for an exemption through the building code.
Yes.
Our council team have not done an exemption like this before. So we would need to work through the legislation. But I do think the legal advice that Roger has received is a good, likely potential solution to the issue that is at hand, where we can't meet Section 75 at this point in time. And therefore, I do think it is a very promising avenue to go down, but it would need to be an application to our building team, and they would need to be considering that under the legislation.
Thank you for that clarification, Ellie.
Mary, if I may point out, the legal advice, they did do some work with Hawke's Bay earlier in the year, where there was a retaining wall that was damaged during Cyclone Gabriel. It went across 3 separate titles. They applied the same scenario and they were granted an exemption. So
it's favourable. I think the point is this is a process to follow. We can't just say we're exempt. There is actually a process. That's what I wanted to clarify. Dave.
Just a couple of things I get where Bruce is coming from and what James said too, although I kind of think like if you get a percentage cost sharing arrangement up front, then it might be an easier conversation than going, oh, it's going to be 300,000 and then you got 100. So if you could agree to some type of cost sharing up front and then you've already had that conversation, I think that they would be hesitant to do that, knowing what the cost would be. But I think that would be potentially in council's favour.
Well, yeah.
But the other thing was when you just said about the title of the wall. So although I'm sure that when the wall is repaired, we probably likely won't have this issue again, but it does still seem to be a slightly complicated problem now. And I don't know how much work is involved in doing this type of thing, but if the boundary was shifted now to put the damaged part of the wall into RSA's ownership, and the liability to come with that also came with a grant from council of $150,000 or whatever it might be, for them to take that liability on, and then the whole wall becomes their problem, and we shift that wall ownership out of council's property going forward. Is that not something that could also be potentially looked at, maybe?
I guess you look at the whole block, though. The RSA use the whole block. And
if I could just add a note there, that is one thing that we have been thinking about, and there's a couple of ways you can do it. You could either move the boundary and then it's probably located within the RSA land. There is also some encumbrances that you could put on both properties, so because they are both fee simple land, so anybody at any stage, not saying that we are or anything, could sell that, and then future purchasers go in with their eyes wide open, knowing this issue and having some agreed parameters of how it would be maintained, and also cost share arrangements going forward. So there is some things that we have been thinking about how we could avoid this situation going forward legally.
Yes, the legal opinion does mention about potentially putting a covenant on any agreement so that in future it doesn't come back to council.
Yeah. There's a question of the costs incurred to date.
Yeah.
We did indicate right at the start when there was only a couple of weeks, some emergency work that we've done, that we would not necessarily require them to respond to that because it came out of the blue. But the inference was the cost from that went onwards would have to still be part of the cost sharing arrangement. There's been no suggestion to the RSA that I'm aware of that would indicate an expectation is that we would, that council would treat them any differently to any other neighbour that we share a retaining wall.
I guess that's the risk of precedent.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah.
Sharon.
That's what I was going to say, that I think we, as a council, we need to move slowly on it, get everything right, because it could potentially set a precedence moving for someone else down the track if we get this wrong as such.
Bruce.
To me, the issue really is from the start saying we've got no money for it. We know we have to resolve this, right? Do we have to give formal approval to a budgetary figure at this stage? You're not, right? I think we can resolve the budgetary afterwards, but yeah, you had, so yeah, so
We can.
We just, to be honest, the team just want to know that we can progress this.
well, yeah, I would, from a recommendation point of view, I would, if council received the report, we direct staff to engage with the RSA to formalise a cost sharing arrangement. Right, this is going to take time.
Yeah.
Right, and three, I would say that council request a further report containing the draft cost sharing arrangement with the RSA and confirmation of cost to council, and then we can make the decision.
I would need to approve a budget for them to be able to do that.
Yes.
So it's not a
Well,
budget
that's what I'm
against retaining.
It's an initial budget. Are we approving an initial budget
Which is what?
to get to a point of having the information that we need to make a decision?
What do we need to budget?
Well, so far we have spent $33,000. And then there's another 15.5, another 20,000 getting the design costs and the third party boards done.
So if we were to say an initial budget of 75 grand to cover the cost, which would be included in the overall costing for the sharing.
We can then come back to council with
Yeah.
more definitive for future approval.
Yeah.
Our driver has been, to date, to keep the public safe. So
Yeah.
that's been our driver. And so when we get something like this come along, we have to prioritise that and something. So appreciate you allocating the budget, but we know we have to address it. We have to keep the site safe. And so
James.
Yep. So yeah, no, I agree that we need to progress things and get some exact figures. Hey, just a question. I know a few months ago there was talk of the Army engineers being involved. Are we in touch with them during this process? And do they have some costings?
Yeah, yes, the RSA have come back and that's not an option anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've been in touch with the Army, so no, it's not an option.
I think, Ali, can you confirm too that our building department have issued a notice to fix?
Yes, our building department have issued a notice to fix, and Roger has just applied for an extension of that, and we're just considering what we need to grant an extension. So from a public perspective, and like Manai said, there is a duty of us to keep the public safe, but from a building consent perspective, we do need to treat council like any other applicant in terms of a notice to a dangerous and unsanitary building notice, is what we've issued. So we are working through that process and looking at the extension that has been applied for.
Can I just ask one? This exemption from the building consent, who is it? Our council that can approve it?
Yes, so it is.
We don't have to go somewhere else.
No, so it is our building team that can approve it. Like I said, we haven't done one before, so we are working through the legislation of that. The building team, I guess, needs to sit neutral to this. You are just an applicant.
Yes.
And we need to process that on the legislation that we have in front of us.
So a way forward, I'll keep it. Sorry.
I was just wondering, thinking outside the square a little bit, is there any way we can fix this after we've
finished building this wall so that there aren't two owners at the end?
Yeah, I think that to Councillor Horn's point, I mean, if I was the RSA, I'd be perhaps a little reluctant and perhaps use it as a bargaining chip. From our point of view, maybe the covenants or the encumbrances have an appeal because they give certainty to future owners of either bit of land. One of the, not overriding drivers, but just a little thing to reflect on, is if we do transfer the ownership of the wall into their ownership, if that was successful, we have to expense our costs and not capitalise them. I mean, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but that's just a little nuance.
But it's not significant.
Perhaps at the after it's done, so we can capitalise them when we do the repairs or do the new wall, and then just sort of give them the land afterwards and go, from now on, it's your problem.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility?
I just think that we're creative accounting there, but
Like, I think the fascinating thing here is we're talking about 300,000 total cost. It's not significant. I guess it's a sum of money that seems quite large, but it's once it's done, there's not like there's ongoing repair work or maintenance technically of it, because it is a retaining wall and it should last another 50 years. Acknowledging that this wall was built in the 60s when there were no standards, there was no reinforcing. So we've inherited this a little bit and alongside a property owner.
I did have that discussion with the finance manager, and it follows public accounting principles that we can capitalise if it's still within the council's legal title.
Yeah, but it's not.
Okay, so just to the sake of moving forward, so with option 3 and the allocation of a budget, is there a number needed, or is it just that where is it coming from, or what's the direction here around it?
Thank you, Adrian. So as I said before, when issues like this come along, we have to respond to them. Whatever number I give you is, I actually don't have a basis for that.
Yeah.
Our driver is to keep the site safe and to progress the issue. Councillor Dew is absolutely right. We saw all of these costs as figuring in the project and in the discussion about cost share. That's how we were going to present it. I'm comfortable if you want to nominate a number. I just don't know whether that number will be.
There's probably no point in trying to nominate a number. So what fund? I guess the other thing is where we're allocating it from.
This is what we typically do, is look at whether we can absorb that from our end of year balance effectively. And if we can't, then that becomes an issue of discussion. So it'll figure up in a financial report later on.
Okay.
Hence the CEO raised a good point, the attraction of being able to capitalise as much as possible. Because it doesn't show on our bottom line the same way.
Yeah, it's advantageous.
Yeah.
Right. So with that, are you all now comfortable to move to the recommendation? No hands up. So Bruce, you sort of are you now comfortable with number 3? You're sort of challenged by that initially, but does this conversation now align that number 3 is potentially okay? Or would you prefer to still consider a
question of acknowledging that the budget will need to be.
Yeah, we need to
change the word approved to acknowledge that the budget will need to be presented to the council.
Yeah, I think this is the thing. Is that we're approving something that's open-ended.
Yeah. So we could acknowledge that a budget will be required.
After more information is given.
Yeah, after.
With the cost of replacing, it's because it's to proceed with the cost of replacing the retaining wall. That is the key thing. We have to
leave it relatively open.
So, yep. So if you manage to get that in there, that it's instead of approved, that
we acknowledge that a budget is required.
Yes. And that's very wide open
to proceed. Yeah, to proceed. The budget is acknowledged. The budget is required to proceed with the cost of replacing the retaining wall with
It's going to be cheaper than if the wall falls on somebody.
Yes, and we need to keep moving on this. It's been a while, and everyone sees the scaffolding up and whatnot, and it's what's happening. So we need to keep progressing. So moved, Kevin. Seconded, Russell, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Good discussion. Thanks, Roger. We now move on to the 7.7, which is the natural hazard submission. And we've got Ellie and Cherie in this space. Good morning, Cherie.
So like you are all aware, natural hazards has raised its profile in the last couple of years on the back of a couple of natural disasters. As a result, legislation across the board has been, or is proposed to be, and has been changed to identify these new natural hazards. One of those has been our responsibilities to issue LIMS under the LGOIMA, the Local Government Official Informations and Meetings Amendment Act. A change has gone through in the DIA last month. We're consulting on the guidelines that they will produce to help councils, both regional councils and territorial authorities, meet those regulations. The amendment is proposed to ensure that the natural hazards information on LIMS is understandable and also set out the requirements between this new relationship with regional councils and territorial authorities to provide information on natural hazards. Due to timing, unfortunately, we thought it was really important that we be involved in this process and provide feedbacks, as it will affect our BAU. And so we submitted and had some questions, or answered some questions that the DIA asked us. This report is to seek Council's retrospective endorsement of the submission in regards to providing regulations for the natural hazards in relation to LIMS, and happy to take any questions on that.
Heads down and lights roll. I think the key point here, as I really took from the document, is around getting clearer guidelines and requirements. That's quite important to me, that if we don't have those clear guidelines, then things get challenged more, don't they?
Absolutely, and it's about consistency across that. Regional council now need to provide us information, and we need to put those out on the LIMS, and so consistency from that perspective, but also consistency in the information we require. We have information that might be historic. How do we supply that? The aim is to make it useful to the purchaser. So there's a very clear focus of this new requirement is to disclose as much information on natural hazards as we can for the purchaser to go into any purchase with their eyes wide open.
Yeah, but don't want to be so overbearing that it makes it unreasonable, because it's quite tough on the current owners to face this situation. I guess we're lucky we're not coastal. We haven't got a coastal environment, because that has its own implication in some areas. Gary.
Yeah, I think the notion of unreasonable, particularly with respect to Māori land, chances are it's not likely to be solved. So the impact of declaration on a LIMS report is going to be, yeah. How does that statement? How do owners display whatever that statement might be that sits on that land?
So, Cherie, jump in anytime. In regards to our responsibility in issuing a LIMS, so an application comes into council, into our customer services team, and then our duty is to disclose all information that we have. And this really is sort of setting some guidelines or some practices about how we should do it just in regards to natural hazards. If somebody doesn't apply for LIM, we won't prepare a LIM and put all of this information out. However, you can apply for the information that we hold on your property file. So not a formal LIM, but if you apply for information that council holds on your property, we just supply it in an unformatted way, I guess. A LIM is, and it's likely, given that Māori land won't be sold, that you probably will never ever apply for LIM. So I don't know how it would be involved in actually formulating that.
I guess I'm thinking of Waichi, where the regional council determined the floodplain spaces and the impact of those decisions. what that is happening on owners of today.
I guess is that around thinking of it from a landowner perspective is what you can do on your land if you were to build a building in that space. I think this is the thing that may not be sold. I think Gary's raising, if I can sort of interpret what you're saying, Gary, is that this land you want to build on it, but if there's an overlay of flood or whatever on it, then wouldn't be wise to perhaps build there. Is this where this information?
So maybe if I can just jump in. So council, as I'm sure you're aware, is doing some flood modelling. How we intend to do it, it's going to be a very comprehensive communication plan so that whether you apply for a LIM or not, you will be able to be involved in the discussion about whether flood hazard goes on your property or not. So I see it more in the initial stages where council is doing some modelling, that we involve the community in those discussions so they have the ability to influence where they can what information does actually fall down on their property. Hopefully that answers your question, because the flood modelling for the regional council came out. I don't know what consultation process they went through, but we do have it now, and obviously that does impact those Waiti Marae properties or Waiti Māori freehold land properties.
There's also possibly with the PIM as part of the building consent process that some of that information would be included as well. Project information memorandum that is part of the building consent process.
Because I guess it's highlighting the risk of people wanting to build on land that may not be suitable.
Yeah, I guess for me it's that information on is it a 100-year flood or is it a 300-year flood? It is, and people are still building on coastal land and risking the next form. All that sort of stuff. Just balance and fairness.
Yes. Okay.
It's not entirely related to this, but you just said about public consultation around where the flood modelling and stuff's going to go. How are you going to take that into account? Because it sounds like only a can of worms that could be like, what if one neighbour's picking up a stink and going, nah, my land doesn't flood, but the other one doesn't hear about it, and then their one ends up with the floodplain model on it, but the guy next door doesn't, and I'm sure you've got a clearer picture of how that might work in your head, but how are you going to, you say, consult with the community? How is that going to actually interact with what the flood modelling is going to look like?
So we have not finalised our communications plan. Jen and her team will be very much involved in it. But yes, it is. We've recently gone through the Cyclone Gabrielle and Auckland anniversary floods. This is going to be very topical, and it does affect most people's biggest purchase in their life, which is their house and their property. So we don't have a communication plans, but we do believe that if we are impacting people's property, that we do need to consult. Obviously, there is going to be supported by a lot of technical information, but it gives people the opportunity to ask questions, to be involved in the process, to influence where they can. And I think that is vital to the process. But we will be relying on Jen and Andrea to work through what that communication plans and how we can involve our community and make sure that our community do know that this is happening and have the ability to influence where they can.
Great, thank you. Just checking through things. I think we've come to a conclusion here around this report, and it's really good those conversations that we have so that council get a broader understanding of what the impact is for council going forward. So it helps build our understanding from a governance perspective. So we'll go to the recommendation that the information be received and that we respectively endorse the submission. Kind of move it,
and I'm
please.
happy to move that.
Thank you, Caleb. Move Caleb. Seconded James Sainsbury. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, and now we move to the council and committee agenda.
I think we're missing the meetings. There's a meeting next.
Yeah, December.
It's 2 in December.
1.
Yes, there's a workshop on the 4th and then an official meeting on the 11th.
Yeah.
Right, so there's
1 meeting. 1 workshop.
Yeah, sorry, two turning up here. Yeah. If you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Okay. Tomorrow's now is in your papers, the calendar that the governance team are putting up for the coming year.
Basically, we've taken this meeting planner to all of the other committees, and everybody has adopted their meeting dates so far, and we've just put up some new dates for council as well. We've got a TBC workshop in January. That was specifically put there in case we needed to workshop the consultation document
Well,
for the age plan. Yeah, so, and then we've got a meeting on the 5th of February and 2 meetings in March. But other than that, the calendar basically has remained the same as what it was this year, and we haven't indicated any dates for meetings following elections, because that will depend on the new council.
And I guess highlighting now is you can see that there's less workshops going forward because we've done the long-term plan. That's where the heavy lifting's done with the workshopping. We've got our bylaws processes underway that they're going to be up for consultation early next year. So those workshops have been had. We move into that lame duck period where we cannot make new decisions with running into the end of the triennium. So our workshop,
big ones.
yeah, so no, we'll let the staff get on with delivering the long-term plan that we have already adopted. There's a tranche of work in there that's happening as we speak. So I just wanted to highlight that the schedule going forward, the workshop schedule is lighter running into next year's elections. It's scary.
Sorry, is this information loaded into our public calendar?
Not yet, because it hasn't been adopted yet.
So, but it will be.
It will be, yes. And sorry, I didn't also highlight that the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting, we would normally have that the day prior to council, but we've brought that forward a week for situations such as adopting the annual report like you did today, allowing that time for staff to make minor amendments should they be required after it goes to that committee.
Yeah, and it was quite a rush to get those minutes, the information through for the next day. I think it gives a little bit more time to, and I acknowledge that our governance team has been under quite a bit of pressure lately with a resignation and just the capacity. So some of these things, it might be an easier run next year. So with that, can I
ask tomorrow?
Population things, so.
We've still got 2 calendars
on our devices. Yeah, that's a separate issue.
Well, it is. It doesn't.
It's not.
I know, but yeah, can we?
Yes, we will be sending everything out from Outlook until we are all on the same platform rather than going through. So at the moment, you're on a different platform.
Because I just accepted something this morning and it's not on there, it's on there. Yeah.
Cool. James.
Yeah, just confirming the frequency of the Chief Executive Performance Committee, because we've only got one for next year. What was the terms of reference for that? We've got one in the
question. We probably have a check. It'll be a workshop, not a meeting. We'd probably have a workshop maybe earlier in that's something perhaps we can talk about as a review committee that we could suggest. That's, yeah, because we can't make a decision on that. James raised an interesting point. And we maybe between us, the committee, understand what that means with a new CE and where it's all heading in the new year. Thanks, James. Thanks for that. Let's note that. So is everyone happy to move the recommendation?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Thank you, Caleb, that the information be received and we confirm the meeting schedule for 2025. And second of Dane, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We've got Ellie needs to come back down. But the civil defence emergency.
She might have just gone to run.
Oh, cool. If we can just adjourn for a minute while we wait for the next agenda item to be presented. Thank you. Okay, so that brief adjournment, we are running ahead of schedule, just waiting for officers, staff to come back into the chamber. So welcome back. We are now doing item 8.1, which is civil defence and emergency management update. Hello again to Ali, and good morning. Very good. Right. Who's leading?
Yeah, so we will hopefully take the presentation, not the presentation, the report as read. However, Mark has got a little bit of a presentation. We just want to sort of update you around some of the things that are happening in the civil defence space, as well as some of the roles and responsibilities as we lead into a regional group plan review. So hopefully Tamara has the presentation up and running soon.
Do I need to use this?
Yep.
Kia ora, Council. My name's Mark Bang. I'm a team leader at the Group Emergency Management Office, and I support the delivery of CD here at the Matamata-Piako District Council, and it's my pleasure to do so. So I'm going to go through the presentation, and it's principally around the work that we're doing on the group plan, and then I'm happy to answer any questions either in relation to that presentation or that have arisen through the report that's in the agenda. So the group are in the process of reviewing their group plan. And that plan is a 5-year strategic document that's required of the group and its members to have a plan by the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act. And while we're producing this plan, we have to be aligned with a few national documents which are up there. The Civil Defence Act 2002 being the first one, obviously. And then the National Civil Defence Emergency Management Plan of 2015. Both of those documents, I think it's fair to say, are pretty tired and are feeling their age. And if you may recall that the previous government introduced a bill to Parliament to review the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act, that was stopped by the present government. And they do intend to introduce a new bill. However, we have been waiting for that to happen, and the Joint Committee of the group decided that we've had our foot on the ball long enough. We can't wait any longer, and so we'll get on with it, with the acknowledgement that when a new act is introduced, we may need to change our plan. So the key document there, though, is the National Disaster Resilience Strategy, and that was produced in 2019. And we're pinning our group plan really solidly to that document. It's got the 3 goals there: managing risk, effective response to and recovery from emergencies, and to enable, empower and support community resilience. And really importantly, it seeks to integrate Māori perspective and tikanga into the emergency management system, which the other 2 documents don't do particularly well. The National Disaster Resilience Strategy is quite important in that it's an all of government document. And it's very aspirational and is based on the wellbeing capitals that were defined by Treasury at the time. And they are the natural capital, social capital, human capital, and financial and physical capital. So it kind of covers off all of our communities and all the integrated parts of our communities. And the goals there align with good emergency management. Thanks, Tamara. Just in terms of a little reminder in terms of Council's roles and responsibilities. So the Council's a member of the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Group, and the Council itself has has a couple of duties under section 64, and that's to plan for and provide for CDM and to ensure it can function to its greatest possible extent during and after emergencies. And then those functions under section 17, other functions of a CDM group, and really importantly, each of its members. So the MPDC has the obligations under section 17 equally with the CDM group collective. And those bullet points, I won't read them out, but they really align with those three goals that I just talked about in the National Disaster Resilience Strategy. Also, I have to acknowledge that councils have other levers to pull given to them by other acts in emergency management, and the most obvious one is in the reduction space, and that's in the land use planning and building control levers that councils continually pulling, providing information through their LIM processes, asset management planning, which is required of them, and business continuity planning, and of course the long-term plan process. They're all levers that the council can pull, which aligns with emergency management. People might think of just emergencies as doing stuff when things go bad. A lot more happens besides that, of course. And just want to acknowledge the work that MPDC is already doing. So there's nothing new in terms of this group plan review. Working with the top 10 risks in that natural hazard management space, which is a function of Resource Management Act. It only deals with natural hazards, of course. CDM deals with all hazards, being those man-made or non-natural hazards as well. And so, there's opportunities there that those non-natural hazards can be partly managed by a land use planning and managing the adverse effects of things like industries and where resource consents are granted and the spatial rules around various zones. So there's lots of levers already being pulled. So nothing new in terms of the support council. Thanks, Tamara. This is just a snip from the National Disaster Resilience Strategy, and it does kind of demonstrate where councils typically are pulling those levers already and as part of their business as usual. So we've got some of those relate to emergency management, specifically around emergency welfare arrangements, for example. Others are the business as usual, so around earthquake-prone buildings and having policies around that, for example, regional and district plans, long-term plans, so on and so forth. So already there's really good alignment with that National Disaster Resilience Strategy and the business of councils. And I think that's really important because, as I said before, we want to underpin our group plan to that document. Thanks, Tamara. Just a little review of how we're structured, the CDM group. So we have our governance at the joint committee, and acknowledge Councillor Smith as the MPDC member on that committee. They approve our policies and provide our governance, as is happening around this table. Then we have an executive arm, also required by the Act, the coordinating and executive group, and acknowledge Ali as being the MPDC chief member on that executive with the chief executive's delegated authority. We have the Group Emergency Management Office where I sit, and we support some umbrella activity and collaboration and coordination across the group members. We administer things like the Waikato Lifeline Utility Group, which MPDC contribute to, the Waikato Welfare Coordination Group, which Tamara sits on as the local welfare manager for MPDC, and currently we're working with Tuatahi in terms of working with iwi liaison as we develop our group plan. So, the philosophy is centralised or regional collaboration and local delivery. And the group plan doesn't. That's provided for in the Act. It's reflected in the national plan, and there's no reason to remove from that. The local delivery is really the important piece, and that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where that delivery has to take place. So, thank you. So just in terms of our philosophy around the strategic plan, the group plan, as I said, it'll last for, the intention is it lasts for 5 years, sets the strategic direction and provides focus for emergency management, specifically in the Waikato region. All CDM groups are required to have a plan. There are 16 groups in New Zealand, and we're all required to have one. And some of the overarching principles, some of the things that we're starting to settle on is the vision and the goals. So the vision would be something along the lines of a disaster resilience Waikato, unashamedly borrowed from the National Disaster Resilience Strategy, and those 3 goals: managing risk, effective response and recovery, enabling, empowering and supporting community resilience. So we're pretty confident that we can reflect those goals and that vision in our Waikato plan. We need to make sure that it's in the language and meaningful to the Waikato. And that's where the wordsmithing will come in and any tweaks to those. Thank you, Tamara.
Just a quick question for you, Mark. It's nice to see you again. Is this plan to improve the readiness of civil defence emergency management as a general phase? Because I imagine with these changes you'll be making improvements elsewhere. So is this just an update on readiness?
No, it covers all 4 R's of emergency management. So reduction, readiness, response and recovery. Readiness obviously a large focus through the in our report we talked about the government's response to North Island severe weather events, for example, and the government is quite rightly putting strong focus on community readiness, and so I would expect our group plan to do likewise. In fact, I know it will, and that is underpinned by that one of those goals. Enabling, empowering, and supporting community resilience. So, that's foundational to emergency management. So, the answer is yes. But not just readiness. In terms of that question, it's a really good question and segues nicely to how the plan will work. The plan needs to be quite strategic. So it needs to have objectives and what success looks like by 2030. And it has to do that at a regional scale. And therein is the problem, right? Because we absolutely acknowledge that not all communities are the same, not all iwi are the same. There's so many moving parts to our communities that it can't be the same. And so our current group plan has around about 80 quite specific actions in it. And some of them are, well, they're over 10 years old now. And quite frankly, we struggle to understand what they mean today and their relevance. So we're proposing a different approach. We're proposing not to have actions in the group plan, but objectives and success factors. So then that will last the full 5 years. And then the next part is the group action plan. And that is where the coordinating executive group each year would agree what are the focus actions that are required or the priority steps to required for the next 12 months to move towards meeting those success factors. And then that flows through into the local, at the district council level work plans. What what does that mean for MPDC in this case? What would MPDC focus on to give effect to that group action plan? And we think that by taking that approach, we are able, as a group, as a collective, we're able to flex and move as policies change, and we know how fast that's happening. And also as emergency events happen around New Zealand, even around the world, and we learn from them, whether they've happened to us or not. We always take the opportunity to learn from them. So that gives us maximum flexibility about how to deliver CDM, what, the who, and how. We've got a plan and to work to, and the end point of our plan is the 22nd of September, where we hope to have the adoption of the group plan. The joint committee have been absolutely certain about have this thing done prior to local body elections, and that is our target. You can see some of the steps there. I guess worth calling out is the focus that's been going on with iwi engagement, and in terms of trying to reflect the voice of iwi and mana whenua into the group plan, and understanding how we can do that. That's ongoing. We've consulted the public. We've put out a survey, and we've got about 650 responses from the public. It doesn't sound a lot, but when there's nothing going on and CDM isn't too sexy, well then I'm pretty pleased with 650 responses, and they gave us some really good feedback too, so that will be included in terms of what's important for our communities. And right now we're starting to draft the operational parts of the group plan, those bits that have to be in there because of the nuts and bolts of it. So the officers are looking into that now. So that's our plan. And some of the challenges worth calling out. So it makes, one of our first challenges is making that national disaster resilience strategy meaningful to the communities of the Waikato, and getting those objectives correct. So filtering that down to that group, and then meaningful for sub-regional levels. Having meaningful statements that speak to all people about what success, what does good look like in 5 years. Where are we now, and where will we be in 5 years, where we want to be, so that we can understand that. And then alignment with council's business as usual activities. If councils need to deliver CDM, then they need funding, and we know that comes from long-term planning. And we understand that there's a challenge in terms of getting our group action plans and our local action plans aligned with those funding mechanisms in the long-term plan and the annual plan. So there are some of the things that would continue to grapple with, but quite confident we'll get there successfully. And yeah, just I guess making the other challenge is making sure that we are taking cognizance of those local differences and enabling local councils to do what they need to do to meet the goals.
Yeah. Acknowledging that we're different.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Thanks, mate. Any questions, Kevin?
There's been a major disconnect for events and communities in what they can do, what you don't want them to do. Maybe there's a way to educate the organisations involved, iwi, Rise, Lions, Rotary, whatever, so that they don't go off hard-cocked and try and do something you don't want them to do. I know when I was the civil defence from council, I did the level 1, level 2 civil defence courses, and that really opened my eyes up to how things worked and what was expected of people. maybe people educate them to maybe doing those courses or whatever. So we're
yes. So what's been happening, of course, with our staff members, they've been meeting with the community groups. That's been happening for a while now with Lauren, and our Toko will take over that challenge too, talking to the different groups, so that probably more in the resilience space of what they can be prepared, but there is that element of understanding.
Absolutely, and maybe I take a different view from some of my peers, but I don't think we actually want the community to stop doing what they're doing. They know how to respond.
Yeah.
They're really good at it, actually, and
we want to enable them.
We want to enable them to do what they do best, including iwi, marae, hapu. You know, they've been doing it for years, and it's just about connecting into the system and stop thinking of civil defence emergency management as an organisation and more of a system. And how can we plug those different parts of the community into the system and communicate with them and share with them and enable them to continue doing a good redirecting where they need redirection, acknowledging that sometimes that is
one of those things I did was come to a couple of the simulations and see how the control room basically operated and what functions there were.
I think the biggest thing with people is that they think council, you know, they will not see council in some emergencies, and you want the communities to work together, share resources if they're isolated. What can they do to preserve their lives and their livestock, especially in the rural areas? Because you're not going to see members of parliament or council, you know, civil defence staff on the ground because they'll be doing all the bigger stuff. That's the power of the people really in the communities, isn't it?
Yes, if I can add that as per our report, and one of the things that I do want to is to, you know, raise the profile of civil defence and what we're doing in that space, and we're likely to come to a workshop and run council through our work plan. But we've been looking at what our strategic directions are, or our strategic pillars in the civil defence space, and working with Tuka since he came on board in August. And as you can see in our report under item J, we've been sort of what are the 4 things that we want to achieve this year and potentially going forward. So pillar 1 was we are prepared. The second one leads to your comments there, Councillor Tappin, is build community resilience. So we've got some actions and we'll work through that with you. Pillar 3 is enhance our capability and capacity, and it's also to understand what our capability and capacity is. That's as a council, but like Mark says, it is actually about the community coming together, and one of those is looking at what our capacity of iwi and marae is as well, and understanding what that is. And then the last one is future ready. There is a lot coming at us. You know, there's Mark has talked about changes in legislation. We've got a group plan, making sure that we're aware of those things that will influence what we do.
Well, with that, any further questions?
I was going to say, it's set up like Lions, Rotary, Greybound, and people come in and do talks to the group that's assembled. Maybe that would be worthwhile.
And Great Hill one we did recently, and it, you know, it was great, well attended, and it was grateful.
Just need microphones so that they can hear.
With or without the microphone.
No, my mother-in-law picked up on that one. She didn't hear, but other people go, what are they saying? What are they saying?
So our emergency officer does go out and about and, you know, is meeting with people. If you went to the Kiwanis in Lawrenceville, was out and about building or educating and encouraging people with a few little activities about how they can be ready and prepared themselves. So we are doing some things in that space.
Interactive has worked really well.
Yeah. So I just would, oh, sorry, Bruce, you go. There you go.
Let's just hope that, you know, whatever happens in an emergency, it's not too big, because Kaikoura had a 7.8 earthquake, and it says here that the assessment here for was up to 9.1. You wouldn't be worrying about anything other than looking after yourself if you had a 9.1 in this year.
So I just, oh, sorry, Russell, you're the.
No, I was just quite happy to thank Mark coming over for your presentation and that, and I'm just happy to.
Recommendation. Yep. And I'll second this one, just with the note of, from Rural Provincial last week, Mark Mitchell came and presented to us at our forum in Wellington last week. He's obviously the minister involved with this, and he, a very genuine guy, acknowledged the leadership and the work that councils do in this space. And I guess one of the challenges that came back from councils is sharing of information, because some of it's private, that of what can be shared, but also the interregional, how some regions they are impacted, whereas we're probably a little bit confined here, so it's probably not as significant. But if you go from Canterbury to Otago, if there's something down there, then it becomes an interregional issue. But other than that, yep, I'll second that motion. So Russell seconded myself. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Sorry, Kevin.
I was going to say just a I have a good friend who was in Taniatua, and they had the big floods down at Edgecombe. And she said that one of the problems they had down there was people who would go out and think they were helping, but they were actually putting themselves into danger. And that becomes a problem. Yeah.
That's always what you can't control everything. Right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that presentation. Thanks, Ali. With that, I will now declare the meeting closed.